We'll open our workshop. We're gonna do some kind of formality items quick, and then we're gonna open the floor up, and anyone that's got a question can go right to the microphone. You'll be on TV, and you get to ask the council any questions you have. Okay? So give us just a quick minute. Council, I will open the Sartell City Council Special Workshop. Agenda approval and adoption. I'm going to move council roundtable to item number 1. So I'll make that amendment that we'll do council roundtable first. All other items should hold. Is there a second for that? I'll second. We have a motion and a second to move council roundtables to the first part of the meeting. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Council, we can take council roundtable now. We can work through this, and then other roundtable items we can take immediately following. All right, let's have some fun. Anyone that has a burning question, again, step to the podium and ask away. There's probably a lot of questions, so let's maybe do 1 or 2 questions a person first, and then we can come back and ask more.
Hello, my name is Fox, and my question is, how much paperwork do you guys get?
How much paperwork do we get? We're trying to do a lot more digitally. So this is our stack of paperwork that has to get signed based off of the actions that we just took that you listened to.
Interesting. Thank you.
But I would add that we get a packet before every meeting, and this week's packet was 390 pages.
What the?
That was for the 42-minute meeting we just had. And then tonight we have a workshop, and that was 545.
In 4 days.
One out of 10, how hard is it for you guys to do your job? All of you, I'm asking all of you.
Well, let's go down the line.
Well, I would say that that ranges, and what I would just say is how hard is it to do our job? I'd give it an 8 sometimes. Yeah, a lot of work and a lot of prep.
I would agree. Obviously, we have topics where some people agree with us and some people don't, but overall, put it at a 5, right in the middle.
I'd say a 5 as well. Some days are a 10, and some days, like this is truly enjoyable for all of us to be able to engage this and answer questions. So today this is a 1.
I would say overall about an 8 as well. I think there's a lot of preparation we have to do, and it's hard to represent all the community members who have different opinions and try to make sure we're making decisions that are in the best interest of all of you guys.
Yeah, I would agree with 8. I think that there's a lot of prep and a lot of thought that goes into before our meetings. We might sit up here and not say a lot, but we have had discussions over and over again on multiple months in a row about the same topic, and then something will come up, like for instance, the solar portion of that. We've studied that for the last 6 months. We've had multiple meetings. We've read through most of the packets and content that is performed or given to us. So we're well prepared, and we've made decisions that best represent what the citizens of Sartell want, and as best we can represent 20,000 people. So.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
My name's Christian, and do you think dogs are the best pet?
Dogs?
Yes.
I do. Any other?
I think so. Does your dad allow you to have a pet? Oh, I heard he's kind of a. Oh. Is that correct, Corey?
Come on, normally we get like tax questions that are really fed from the parents. And
I'm Connor, and I just want to know what you guys all do here.
what do we all do here?
Yeah.
What's that?
You know, I think actually the meeting tonight was a good representation that people in our community, whether the developers or residents, want to do something, and they'll work with our staff throughout the week and months and years to bring a plan forward for the city council to then deliberate and vote on or make a decision on. So that's what the five of us are tasked with, is reading all those documents, understanding, asking questions, and then making a decision.
Was your name Connor? Is that what you said? Were you wondering what they do like for jobs? Do you want
Thanks
to?
for the clarification.
Yeah. So they can go through their day jobs, but I think it's a really good question, because what's interesting about Sartell and a lot of cities is that this is for the most part, a volunteer role. And so they have daytime jobs, but their roles on the council are elected and volunteer positions. Some cities do have elected officials that they get paid full-time, like it's their full-time job. But I'll let them go down the line and share what their actual, so during the day, they have a different job than when they come here. So they come here outside of their normal work days.
Yeah, I spend most of my time in banking at a local credit union. That's what I do every day during the day, and I come here twice a month.
So I am a human resource manager at a cabinet shop in Foley. So that means is I hire people and hopefully don't have to fire people. I do people's paycheck every week and do stuff like that.
I lead a team of people that manage supply chains around the world. So think about the uniforms that you're wearing today. How did they ship to get to you in a store or get made? So
I work in healthcare administration in a pediatrics office, so I do more of the business side of pediatrics.
And I work for a general contractor. I build buildings for a living and help people kind of achieve what they want to build.
So as you can see, as Anna highlighted, we're elected to this, and so all of our backgrounds is what's unique, and the collective five of us having discussions and asking questions from where we come from or the experience we have is what makes us successful.
Hi, my name is Alex, and I'm wondering if any of you do scouting.
Great question. Do we have any scouts?
I was, yep, all the way through.
Doesn't sound
ninth
like we
grade.
have any.
I was a Girl Scout, if that counts.
I was a Boy Scout.
Good to know.
Hi, my name is Owen. Do you like your job?
Love it.
Yeah, I love what I do for a living.
I do. I actually work with my dad, so I work with my dad every day.
I do like what I do. So
I hope I like mine. I've been doing it long enough, so yes, I do.
I don't know if we dare, but usually the parents will have some questions too.
Corey.
So let's out of Corey and Ryan. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Joel. So I asked my son if he knew the difference between the mayor and the city council and what the difference of their jobs were, and he didn't know. So I'm
Good
asking
looks,
that
mostly.
on his behalf.
Great question. The city of Sartell and most cities in Minnesota have what's called a weak mayor system. And so as a mayor in the city of Sartell, there's no greater authority for this role versus a individual council member. We're all one of five, and we make decision by three or more. So that's a majority or more will make that decision. Really, the only item that the mayor does would be more ceremonial items within the community or attending on behalf of city council. There you go.
Hi, my name's Anna. I'm the PAC 211 Den leader for these kiddos, they're all fifth graders, and they're transferring into the troop next month. So they'll be troop members for Boy Scouts. So this is their kind of last official meeting, and this crosses off a requirement for them. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this. What's been the best project or activity that you've worked on as a committee this year?
This year?
Our
All right.
first meeting.
2023, sorry. It's too early in this year.
You know what? We'll start down here.
I think that, improving the city is, we're tasked to make sure we make the right decisions, and I think we see a wide variety of projects that come through, and for instance, the new walking bridge over the river. Have you guys been down there and seen that? Pretty cool, right? Yeah, that's pretty cool, right? So that's pretty fun to go down and see that come to fruition. And we have great staff here that help us make that decision, that they come back to us with ideas and figure out how much it costs, and then we make a decision, can we afford it? And those things kind of, when it comes to a fruition and the bridge opens up, that's a great, the river walk and all that fun stuff is really, really neat to be part of.
I think the most exciting thing we're working on we were working on in the past year is the mill site. If you guys know where the old paper mill was across the river. So eventually that bridge is going to lead to the other side. So we've been working really hard to do some studies and planning to determine what potentially will be on the other side when you guys are a little bit older.
A museum.
Those are great ideas.
I would say the mill site as well, or the mill property. A couple of us here serve on the fire department, and was there the day that it started on fire, and we fought fire for 9 days following. And so, saw it when it was in its glory days, saw it when it burned down, and now we get an opportunity as a city and as part of the city council to kind of bring it to life again in what it might become. And so we, some may know, we had been fighting back and forth in legal battles with the previous owner for almost that entire 10-year stretch. Went to the state Supreme Court once, if not twice, for some rulings, and it was just getting drug out. And we finally were able to get to a spot where we acquired the entire property so that we could stop spending legal dollars and move forward. So now, I guess as we like to say, the shot clock started on us, and now it's ours to repurpose and put back into use, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna give the same answer to the mill site. So when that fire happened, I was dating my wife, and now we're married for 10 years and have 4 kids. I get to help craft what goes there, so, and it's gonna take another 10 years until it's probably completely done. So yeah, it's kind of cool to have, and why I ran for council is I have 4 kids that are in the schools or in the parks. They're in all the stores that are in the city, so to be able to have a say on hopefully making things better is why I'm on the council.
I'm going to try to be different. I do love the mill site, but I would just say a couple things. The first thing I love about Sartell is the collaboration between businesses and the city and the school, and just the openness to continue to talk about those things. If you had to ask like a project in my first year here, I would say, hiring a police chief was a pretty big deal. And we obviously had a lot of great candidates for that, but that experience I thought was great, and I think we ended up with a really good one. So.
Man, now I feel like we shortchanged the chief. We all talked about the mill site, and here you sit, like.
Thank you. Good questions.
Was it hard to be elected city council? I would say
Harder for some.
the last election was really challenging. It is. You're in 5th grade. Anyone in here on student council, the newly formed student council in 5th grade?
I wanted to be. I was like this close to getting.
Yeah. So how hard was that, right? You had to put yourself out there. You had to campaign, right? Everyone made a poster to to try and express why they would be good for the role. It's exactly what we had to do here within the entire community. So, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. You too.
All right, we will move into, council, any other roundtable items to bring forward? That'd be awesome. Thanks, Corey. Yeah. Any other council roundtable items? Seeing none, I guess just of note, joint planning board tomorrow night. Wednesday night, we have, workshop. We were very intentional about it being 5 o'clock.
Just so I'd be there on time, I think.
Yeah. I think that's the only items, for council. And then again, sorry, on Thursday, we've got the Everything Sartell interviews. If you can make those, I think there's a team invite or a virtual invite.
APO meeting if you guys wanna join.
APO is Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay. Thursday at 11:30, there's a lunch brunch at Celebration Church. They asked me to come speak. It's a gathering of, I think the older community, for lunch, so.
Fine, older.
We'll move on. Development updates.
Yeah, I'll be there.
All right, we are just trying to get the PowerPoint going here. Carrie, you want me to start and you jump in and add? The first item here is the Waters Church. For those of you that are on the Joint Planning Board, you have seen their proposal. They're planning to do an expansion out the back side towards, you can kind of see the gravel parking lot. Well, is it, it is a,
It's paved.
it's paved. Paved parking lot towards the Lar property. They're planning to do a large expansion there for a daycare and a gym. And so they reached out and inquiring about additional parking space, additional green space, and then also an additional access point. Their one access point is kind of a goofy intersection there with 12th Street North. It doesn't match up perfectly, and thankfully haven't had any major accidents to date, but they'll have a much larger flow of traffic coming through there with this addition, and then on top of that, a daycare. They do not own any additional property, and of course, we own the property to the north. So they did reach out. They asked whether we'd be willing to sell that. At this time, we don't know the exact intent of that property, and especially with 15th Street North intended to go through there at some point, and then expansion of Pinecone Central Park. Weren't sure that sale was something that the city was necessarily interested in, but recognized that the access, having an additional access could definitely be beneficial from a public safety perspective. And so asked for them to just put together a preliminary drawing, and they expressed a willingness to lease, recognizing that it would be temporary until we knew further details on what we would plan to do with that property. With that, we advised them that because it would be temporary in nature, that it, probably don't put in like a concrete parking lot. So it would require an exception or variance to our ordinances. Our ordinances do require paved parking lots with curb and gutter. They would still need to be meeting our stormwater requirements, and we'd still have a full site plan review, but just know that we try to keep costs down, knowing that at some point it would potentially or likely be torn out once we know the full intent with that property. But before we got too far with them, we wanted to make sure that since it's our property, that this is something that the council would even entertain. So they haven't spent too much, design plan. This is just a sketch on a computer system. So before we get too far, we thought we'd run it past council. Carrie, anything you'd add?
Just to piggyback on just your comments for the paved parking, that is our ordinance requirement. Right now and currently, another thing of discussion or note of discussion is our requirements are curb and gutter. However, in the city, we have went away from said requirements through site plan approval process, but we always start those discussions with our city requirements, requiring curb and gutter. Sometimes with discussions with the developer, we'll go away from requiring curb and gutter, but we still do go back to our ordinance, which requires paved parking. Another item of discussion is this property is part of the annexation that we will initiate this year. So I believe December 9th of 2024 is when we'll have that public hearing for this annexation for the Waters Church. So that will be part of the city after that public hearing.
What, are we doing questions?
Yep.
What is their plan B if we needed that property for 15th Street? Like, where would the parking go?
Good question. So they do have first right of refusal of the LAR property, which is the property directly to the west, which is a 4-acre parcel, but it's currently occupied. Their intent is that future expansion plans would go that way, but they would like and did express an interest that once we have further clarity on what we'd like to do with this property, that I do believe that they would still like to purchase at some point, if the option would be available. We didn't promise anything. We just have no clue what our intention would be, but.
And if the timing was off, then they have a daycare center and gym, but not adequate parking.
They do have adequate parking per the site plan review.
They do?
So it's not it's not that they can't do their project, it's just there are definitely times, and especially given the auditorium space that they have there, that they fill out the parking that they have already. They really were more so concerned about the access, of just providing a second access out to Pinecone.
I think we brought that up.
As
At the joint
discussed at
planning
joint
meeting
planning.
was the amount of traffic that's going to be coming in and out of there at daycare rush times, before school, before work, and after work. That intersection there is congested on normal traffic. I gotta imagine you start to put all that student traffic on Pinecone, people trying to cross there. It just seemed congested to me, and I think we brought it up in the joint planning meeting that should explore other opportunities that might present themselves. I didn't know they were coming to us with that, but.
So does the LAR property, that doesn't solve that problem at all, though,
No, that would just solve the parking.
Right.
So if and when we were to sell or redevelop that property, we would definitely want to consider and probably work to try to incorporate continuing that access in some way, but that'll depend on what goes in there.
And on that note, how much do we know about 15th Street North? Just in some of the preliminary plannings, does this property really impact that significantly? Or is there a place where we felt like, hey, we could get this to a level where we really have low risk once 15th Street North does go in?
The 15th Street North corridor is pretty well set. So it'd be north of what's shown right there. It would line up adjacent to the current 15th Street North. So I think it's less of how 15th Street North will impact it and more of what the park plan is in the future.
Yeah, I was gonna defer. We don't really have a master plan, and we've been working with that park without a master plan for a number of years, and we keep making big chunks of land for basketball and soccer and whatever, and I just don't want us to look at it back and say, why did we do that? Because that's a big significant part of that park going in, and additional parking for it.
I do know one thing, Tony did go out there and walk it with us. And he liked what they were proposing, you know, from a lease perspective, just because it does add quite a plethora of parking, that they are currently or have already carved trails to the soccer portion of Pinecone Central Park. So right now we have parking issues out there already, especially if there's baseball and soccer happening at the same time, and especially if there's a tournament. Now we added basketball out there. And so this would allow for parking accessible from the back side of the park through the trail system that they have, instead of having them to, essentially an overflow for the park. So part of why we're like, well, this could be a win-win for everybody, but just also recognizing the intent is that it would be temporary.
That's my biggest concern, not with just the ladders, but you know how any group or any congregation or anything, assume it's theirs, and it just gets out of control, and then are we to step in and take it back from somebody? That's just.
And what is that?
We'd have to
look
have a
like?
very clear agreement.
Yeah, sorry, let John finish. I mean, I love everything the Waters Church does in our community, and I struggle with this a bit. You know, we get projects brought in front of the council frequently, and one of the items that staff often highlights for us is there a impact on traffic or congestion? And we, from a joint planning board, approved the expansion of this place with the new daycare, and I think everyone is super excited. 110 spots, I believe. But now we're going, hey, wait, what are we gonna do with traffic? And to me, it feels a little bit of hindsight, and I do get that, and I appreciate the fact that they have adequate parking on site today. It's really the congestion of that in and out, and it doesn't align with 12th Street, I think, how we would probably ideally like it. I don't know, I have a lot of reservations of doing any type of lease or adding another in and out on that road. I don't know, as I mentioned at the joint planning board, like, hey, 7 a.m., that's gonna be really busy with drop off and pickup in the afternoon. And I don't know, I think I would challenge us, how do we creatively help solve that problem for a short period of window? Rather than leasing out or doing something different with the park space.
Yeah, I agree. I'm concerned about leasing land we own and then having to take it back at some point, and that being looked on by residents poorly because it's something we have to do. And then I also just have, whenever somebody's talking about making an investment in land they don't own, it gives me pause. Like, even if that's not to code, it's gonna be very expensive for them. And if in 2 years we have to take it back for some reason, that's not gonna be favorable either.
Well, and I think, Alex, you might have made the point, at that point, it's leased property, and you know, it's the lease owner's property to do what they would with it. I think the one example we have here is Shields Athletic Complex is leased city property, and so anything that happens within that is on that organization. And so I mean, I can appreciate, hey, there's a soccer game going on, that's the easiest parking. But that really in this situation or scenario presented to us, that's up to the Waters Church if they want to allow that parking or not. And should something happen on that, it's not happening on parkland per se, it's happening on the Waters property. So, boy, I feel like we get into a really tough situation while also respecting there is going to be a traffic jam.
Usually they just walk up and they stop and come to let them all out. Not even kidding.
Really?
That's happened to me more than once, but they stop the traffic. They come out and they stop the traffic and let their whole parking lot out.
Oh, yeah, they'll put flaggers out there, I've seen that.
Sidebar.
God's work, God's work.
I think the weird not alignment of 12th, I think it's a, yeah.
And I think one of my like main questions, which I just spoke briefly to April, is the intent of this parking. And you were in discussion with them, but is it for event type purposes or is it daily parking purposes for daycare? Like that would be my question, because John and I went out there when they've had events in the past and they've done some sort of temporary 1 day off parking out there, but I guess that would be my question to them.
Yeah, we didn't necessarily get into the detail of what they'd use the parking for. It was, honestly, for the permit use, they have enough parking. As far as ordinances go, it's more the access piece. And really the only way that they are ever going to be able to correct that access piece is either, they mentioned that they thought about an access point just north of their property, but staying on their property, but I believe they have like a stormwater retention in front there or something of the sort.
They've got an infiltration basin there. There's a little bit of space. You could even move it to the north side of their parking lot. That entrance road in right now is technically owned by the city. It's part of park property as well. Any distance you can get that entrance away from 12th north, further north, the better, but then I would recommend closing this one if you're adding one. If you're adding one between 12th and 15th, we would probably recommend you close this one.
Yeah, and that's what we've saw. I mean, that's consistent with South Pinecone, right? You want as least amount of access to Pinecone as possible. So to your point, hey, move it further north, or if if there became an option to realign at 12th, then we would have a controlled intersection of some sort there that could facilitate.
Yeah, and likely any park access in the future would come off of 15th Street North, would ideally, I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So am I hearing to let them know at this time we desire to leave that property be?
I think that's what I'm hearing. I just want to ensure that we're not missing an opportunity to maybe fix some of the traffic things that we have, and while not ruining maybe the longer term plan would be my only thought there, because that is a really bad intersection. To your point, and if they're going to add a daycare there, it's just going to we might find ourselves right back here going, okay, now what are we going to do? Because it's going to get real busy there, I think. So.
Well, and where is the daycare? Is it going like west of the church?
It's
Like
going
towards
right
the
where
LAR property?
Right where the P on Pine and the 7 are. It's gonna run north and south there.
So is that like, in my mind, I'm thinking, how do you create drop off for daycare? And like, does this even provide that?
I think that
That's what they're trying to do, is loop.
Loop it. Because the drop off would be in the backside. Essentially where, like Ryan said, where the 27 is as an addition off of the west side of their building. And 141 spots?
110 ring in my mind.
Or 110, 140 was the other one. So it's not gonna be small as far as number of families. I mean, Brandon, maybe it's one of those things where we have PD take a look at the traffic. I don't know, or I don't know where to go from, yeah.
Or if the problem is the access points and drop off for their business, like, could we, I mean, if you just look at that component of land, like, is there a piece we could shave off of the property we own, sell it to them so that they can have adequate access? They own it. They can drop the kids off in the back and loop through the other way.
And they approached us to purchase, to be, like, they would prefer, I think, to purchase, but we thought that we don't, aren't ready to make a decision on that, but maybe that is the best route, to carve off
Like, not for the parking lot per se, I'm not totally comfortable with all of that space, but just to
A smaller,
provide the access.
just something that would allow the access.
Well, and again, to, you know, my interpretation of April's point, so I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but if we were to do that, ideally you'd have one, you wouldn't have two, which means we would probably push it to the north and go right through those trees, which separate, I mean, just off this picture is 15th Street South, so wouldn't wanna go too far north, because then you're gonna create the other problem to the north, right? You'd have to find some middle property between 12th and 15th, which, you know, they're obviously not gonna wanna go through those trees based off of
Well, and
all
it's
the activities they go through.
And it's all granite.
Sure.
There's other logistics that have to be worked through, because right now, that current access road, which is city property, also is access for the Lar parcel. But you're right, I would recommend closing this one. I mean, just its sheer location, and then to know if you're adding two and they're looping, you're not really solving any of the access concerns. So is their main concern access, or is their main concern parking? It sounds like it's both. I would very much concur with the access part.
I think at this time, we're not a seller or a leaser, but
Studier.
let's keep figuring out a way that if it's an event, that access is a challenge, or there's caution, I think, you know.
I mean, if we're brainstorming, right?
Yep.
So that small sliver that is currently, and the access road is a small sliver. It's almost like a road right of way. I don't know if there's a way to sell that portion to them, because we would never want to park access off of that location anyways, where they could do some sort of parking expansion to the south to get a number of parking spots. I don't know how many that gets them. It's not a whole lot of space. They have some sort of access easement with the Lar property, and then you either sell them another chunk to the north, or you already own the access and you do another access on the north, just to try and save the access, or solve the access problem, but get them at least some property along that south edge for additional parking.
But under that, you'd be suggesting that they'd use the same access?
No,
It'd be a different access.
they would turn that access road and expand their parking lot to the south, and they would have to come in from the north somehow. Again, just brainstorming ideas.
Oh, I see what you're saying, yeah. We do own just south of where the current access is like,
South of the Methodist Church, we own some property.
yeah, that goes out to Pine Cone, but then directly behind it, there's like 3-4 acres right there that it's pretty wet. I mean, it can't be developed. It could be a parking lot, but that's probably about it. Doesn't solve the access issue, but.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what it starts to feel like, right? I mean, if any for-profit business is like, hey, we're growing beyond what our site can do, at some point, they're gonna have to
Does the property work?
work on a solution.
And nothing against the water, but I just feel like that's kind of what they're at. Because like you said, in the land, they're not gonna go through their pond with their trees. It's gonna be, we want this access over here.
All right.
Okay.
Anything else under development updates?
Yep, one
Yeah,
more.
there's cool.
This is a second one that we wanted to flush out with you guys before we got too far on it. So I think the four of you were a part of, I believe the four of you were a part of the initial RFP process where we took RFPs for multiple city properties. Alex and Jill, you guys might not have been on at that time, but it was the same time that we did the fire hall, Public's old police building, and then also this lot that is currently Centra Soda Ortho. So we also listed the EDA lot in front of Shields Arena at that time and took proposals. We did not receive any back. For the property, it has some challenges. Primarily, there's a wetland on it, so it is a like 2.5 acre lot, but only about an acre of it can be developed. And then also there is no utilities to it, or there's no sewer to it.
There's no sewer.
And so you'd have to connect sewer from the Second Street businesses and down, which would be pretty costly. And Jeff Drown, who actually owns the businesses on the vacant lot on Second Street, previously owned the strip mall that Riverside Dental is in. He built that. He is interested and willing to connect utilities down to the lot to develop it. He's also interested in whether you want to call it a swap or just gifting us. There's a small parcel that he owns by the Huntington Water Tower that he would do as an exchange. It's not like it's property that is usable property for necessarily developing. It's right on the corner, and but it would be an expansion of our park essentially. It would go into the Huntington Park there. So before we got too far and before he got too far, we wanted to flush this one out and see council's appetite. His intent, it sounds like he has some tenants confirmed or would be willing to be confirmed there, he wants specifically a drive-through option, and it sounds like a pizza type, like I get the impression that it's like one of those smaller Pizza Hut type models that you can get pizza quick and multi-tenant.
Yeah, I'll, just some of the other topics we've discussed between Anna, Jeff and I, there is an understanding that it would involve reconstruction of all or a portion of First Street South, and that is something from the city standpoint that
We would
require, on him to do that reconstruct, just because it would be beneficial for the property, for access there. He also understands that there be some wetland impacts for the access point that you see there. It's minimal, but he understands that there be some wetland impacts just for the access to this property as well, and we just follow our standard process for that. And it would require a variance for our wetland setbacks, which for this site, it would most likely be necessary for any development that we'd see, but we've done that in the past. To see this land get developed, we'd most likely need to go through the variance process for those wetland setbacks for what's proposing, or what he's proposed to us as well. For the utility connection, we'd require those utilities to be pulled from 12th Avenue as well, because due to other utilities off of Pinecone, it wouldn't be able to be tapped into those, so we'd have him pull from 12th Avenue. Any other comments, April, for utilities? So.
Just point of clarification, I believe we held this one off the market. At that time, we were exploring the Tom Beerson courts were gonna go there.
Oh, you might.
Yep.
You might be right on that.
Because maybe you had found out that the sewer wasn't there, and it's like,
I think Scooters had done this exact same of, hey, I know you own property there, let me look at it. But during that point in time, we had believed this was gonna be a site for the basketball courts, which was kind of unique because it could leverage parking spots and wouldn't need the sewer.
Yeah, now that you say that, I think you are right. We were gonna include it and then we left it off because of the basketball courts. Yep.
sewer.
The cost of it, yeah.
Yep, I'm just looking through right now. It looks like we had Pinecone Road North, which would have been the Centra Soda property, and then the Great River Bowl properties, which would have been around some of those warehouses there, police, fire hall. We had the one vacant residential, which was off of 9th. So, yep.
And one of the other challenges there was at the time, there was a desire to align, again, kind of going back to our previous conversation of access points, there was a desire to align the entrance into this site with the entrance in for the Burnix Shields parking lot. And I think that, if I'm not mistaken, went through some wetland, became somewhat challenging for that to all happen. I don't know, the site is like a premier site visible from a visibility perspective in our community. I agree with you, we're gonna have to make a concession at some point to do something. I just don't know what that right something is. I don't know, and I would tell you that hockey nights there, that intersection's also crazy. And so to think you're gonna have rotating cars in and out for a pickup, a short stop is going to also be challenging.
Also, the land swap is interesting and intriguing, but I don't know if, like, can we justify that, I guess?
Do we,
If it's to your point, it's prime pine cone, right?
maybe we throw it in with this broker? I mean, we're gonna have them looking at the property on Fourth Avenue, and it would be, just given our previous experience with selling city property, it maybe would be best if we run this through a broker. And, I mean, it's probably one of those deals where you're gonna, it's a dollar lot, just like Centra Soda, because it has $300,000 worth of improvements that need to be made just to build on it, but at least it's being run through a broker then, and
Yeah, I guess I look at it and I would agree with you. I think it's at some point a dollar lot. But some of the conversations we've had about over the years is having this lot in our inventory so that when the right opportunity comes, we're able to act on it to say, look, we've got this, it's already, this one I believe is already in our EDA.
it is, yep.
And we can act on it. I guess I'm sitting here with the absence of, is there something that our community doesn't have as an amenity that we'd really want to attract and bring in right now to depart this for a dollar?
One of our discussions at a staff level was the thought of when we first were presented the land swap topic of having a sunset for that land swap, of if this property isn't developed within 5 or 10 years, whatever that sunset is, that we could then take back the property if it wasn't developed, just because it is a prime property and location off of Pinecone. That was some of our initial discussions. I don't know council's thought process on that, but that was also an idea just to ensure that if we would do a land swap or the sale of this property, that we could, in turn, if it isn't developed in that time period, take it back, is also a thought.
I think that some of the deterrent for people to build there or purchase it is the infrastructure that's needed. I mean, First Street and the sewer, I mean, that comes with a big price tag. And a lot of times you're running a small little business there, you can't make that in your pro forma work. So it will kill most small entrepreneur type development there. If someone wants to propose a solution that works and gets all the fixes to the infrastructure there, I think we listen to it. I mean, I just know that, you're not gonna find somebody that, for instance, scooters, it just, the cost to develop there is so high. Even though it is a premium site, I mean, I think it's great, but we have it as a city to hold on to it and see what happens. That's the other option, but.
I don't disagree that there's substantial cost with it, but I think at the same time, we've had 2 people in the last 2 years interested, so I think that shows that there's that interest there, and at some point, we would hope something would come around. And like scooters, we have other properties we can point them to that have the visual that this spot does. Yes, I'm kind of in the camp of not just give it away at this point.
To Tim's point on the utilities, the people that have been interested, that the sewers just killed it on extending that sewer. I think the interested party, because they own that adjacent property to the west, it makes it more economically feasible for them because the extension of that sewer also benefits his other property. You know, we talked about upgrading First Street South, which would be a huge benefit. I don't know if that's just to a point where the access is in or it ends up being the entire First Street South, but I think that's why they're seeing this as economically feasible, is because it's benefiting his other property, where, to your point, I agree with you, Tim, you get somebody else in here that's gonna, from a price tag, that might kill it, likely kill it.
And we have had multiple, I know ETS was interested at one point too, but as soon as they find out about the investment of the sewer, they're out. I mean, you're spot on. I think if you have somebody who's at least willing to pursue what the sewer connection, I mean, obviously the lot that he owns on Second makes this more economical because it's included in the two. I don't know that you're gonna come across, it's such a small space that.
Perfect for a car wash, wouldn't you agree?
Too soon.
Well, is there value to the land? Like, could we have it priced out by whatever realtor we go with?
Yeah, that's
and
where I think.
negotiate from there, because do we even want this land in Huntington?
That's what Carrie and John had talked about this afternoon, is like,
It's just
leave
more
the
to mow?
swap as I mean, if he's willing to throw in the swap, whatever, but I think if you're gonna sell it, run it through a broker and have them negotiate it so that they can determine the value. And
mean,
I don't know.
As I listen to the fact that he has the adjacent property, there's some efficiency there for putting in sewer, which nobody else is probably gonna have.
Yeah, I guess as I sit and listen to others and, you know, think about what ideal state might be, right, in the future, hey, what would it be hypothetically, an opportunity came to us to do that? We likely then are on the hook for some improvement of First Street South or some improvement of the sewer line to make it happen, right? And I guess if we have a potential buyer now that is ready to do that or willing to do that, I mean, I don't know that we would be able to sell this at much more than $1 and force them to do all the updates.
Sanitary sewer would be about 200,000. Very rough number.
For just sanitary sewer? Yep. The thing I would say is, if we go down that path of exploring what a sale of this would be with the improvement to redo of First Street South and the sewer line, it's not redo it as it is, it's redo it as if it's a new road, curb gutter to spec.
City standard, yep.
And not
And you did
make a
tell
bunch
them
of variances
Yeah.
or,
But you know, who benefits from that? The arena does. I mean, so there has to be some shared cost incurred. I don't know how you do that. I mean, that we obviously are the tenants there, but.
well, the original road was put in order for Grandview to build.
It was a fire access for Grandview.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
It was never intended to be a regular.
That size of space, multifamily has to have 2 ingress, 2 egress. And so that's where that road started. And then an arena built onto it, and it's never been up to code. It's a terrible road. I mean, similar to Pinecone or Central Park Boulevard, is we didn't build it to our own spec. So my point in all that is, I could probably get around to it if someone's willing to bring First Street South to spec, and I do agree there's efficiency that others wouldn't have in that.
And Jeff was fully aware of it would be a up to city spec road that he'd have to bring First Street up to. And there was no discussion of what would that look like cost share between the city and him. He was proposing it, so I mean, we can go down that discussion if it's brought up, but he was in full awareness of bringing that up to our city standards, and the extension of utilities, and mainly it was because he was benefiting from his other property as well, so.
I also, I mean, again, different uses, probably less in my idea, or my mind, less, for-profit uses, but, you know, there was a pretty big push on a skate park at one time. Like, this type of property, and like we said, the basketball courts, this type of property could be beneficial there, where you don't need the sewer access. So it's an opportunity for amenities, in my opinion, but.
Yeah, it just depends if you guys want to generate tax base or not.
Rob, what would the tax base on that be?
Depends on the value.
Estimated market value on his build.
You could look at,
Square
Like-
feet, say 9,000.
what's scooters, I mean, that's a small, but I'll be curious once he actually starts really digging into it, if he could even get that big of a building on there. So that's why scooters come to mind I mean, I know that's probably smaller, but
Scooters was almost a $1 million build, so,
But that's like, what, 2,000 square feet?
right, a
Yeah.
fourth of that,
Yeah.
so.
800 square feet. Wow, that's way smaller than I thought. I can,
I mean, my point is, I don't know that we're gonna, it's gonna have an impact in Rob's world of this hitting the tax rolls or not, right? It's, what is the amenity to come into our community?
Yeah, if it was $1 million commercial property, it's about 10,000 in Sartell city taxes, not including county, school district. I don't know if this is $1 million or not, and then you also have development fees, which
Yeah.
would help with infrastructure improvements. But, yeah, just a blip on the radar if it was just 10,000.
It's already a platted lot, so we wouldn't have any of those trunk fees. The only fees that we would recover would be our water and sewer access charges, that we'd receive upon the building permit payment.
Council, we've had dinner sitting in front of us for about 20 minutes. Can we get a consensus on what we want to do here?
I think it's worth exploring further.
Yeah.
Worth exploring?
Yep.
I agree. I think especially if you went the broker route as well, and I like your idea of the land swap being, if we're going to go that route,
Yep.
that there's a time frame that it just doesn't sit there. But I also, hearing you speak, Ryan, about an amenity, right? Do we have a parks thought process and plan? Would that be a site we would consider from a low cost expensive? But from a development perspective, you have a buyer that has a vested interest that where the infrastructure is going to be hard to sell to other people. I think to kick the tires would be for sure something we should do here.
yeah, maybe we can just, I mean, Carrie, you can explore it a little bit further with Jeff. Like, I still will be really curious as he learns more about the challenges and the wetlands and, is this really even feasible and doable? So I mean, we just didn't want to send him too far down the road if council was like, absolutely not. But it sounds like there's willingness to explore. We'll see where it goes. And then if it is still a go, we can always run it through the broker once we select that.
And I'd advocate that we don't add the swap of land. To me, that confuses.
Yeah.
If you think about the valuation of that.
He can donate it.
Right.
Sure.
I mean, I think that would be the best route so that it's not tied.
It feels like if we could just be clean on this parcel.
Right.
With that, and Jed, your last comment was kick the tires, I think, and this is obviously recorded, but, being clear to communicate that council is willing to, evaluate further, but until we know more, it's not a blessing that we're looking to sell this or looking to get the deal done, right? It's, let's explore, let's understand, let's make sure they understand and present an offer.
You got what you need?
Fair?
Okay. Do you want to get food?
Pause and grab
Yeah.
your food.
Okay, yeah.
Post your name real quick.
Thank you.
Oh, look, I asked you this one.
Mediterranean bed, that's one that Addie did. Yeah. I was like, screw that, I'm not signing up for the lower one. I messaged the association and they're like, yeah, just stay. I was like, okay, good, glad we agreed. I'm not gonna sit in those without somebody to talk to. Bobby, are there napkins anywhere? We're gonna need some of those for sure. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Jed, you grab me some napkins?
Do not want an apple? Not an apple while you're sitting. I know, I'm like, did they seriously give us a whole apple? Yeah.
What'd you get?
I have no idea. It's a surprise. I just didn't want the veggie. That's all I knew. Give me the real deal.
I just wanted that kid to ask us, like, 1 through 10, how hard your job is? Whatever Pete says, 1 higher than.
Yeah. Do you love your job? I'm like, are they asking about council or their day job?
I've already told my job, don't, if they get you, don't translate. So it depends.
Yeah.
Do you think dogs are your favorite pets? I'm waiting for Tim to be like, I prefer cats. Oh, we got a whole stack here. Don't you worry.
This looks messy.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you picked the messiest one, I think. No, I'm not gonna gnaw on an apple. Apple for the teacher.
No extra credit.
Yeah. $17 to $3. See, I told you, Penix is, they're gonna put it all on him and they can't even get a TD.
Michigan's already rushed for 150, 180.
Yeah. They can stop Penix. That team doesn't have anything.
I have 3 waters up here.
Yep.
Guess I really need to hydrate.
Michigan's gotta literally there's not a weakness on their team. You're not gonna have just one stud. They got studs everywhere.
All right then.
All right, you guys go ahead and eat, and I'm gonna, you guys, have kind of heard about this program. I've been putting in my Friday update and shared out the links a couple times. Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity, Sartell, and Stearns County and St. Cloud are the only communities in the region that received it based on size. They did reach out, and Joe Schulte asking if there'd be a willingness to partner for the SaberCon program. It is an eligible use to support nonprofit affordable housing providers in their mission to provide safe, dignified, affordable, and supportive housing. So there is not a best practice created throughout the state yet. This is a very new program. Rob has reached out to a bunch of other cities that he works with through GFOA, and they've all said they haven't created anything yet. We don't really have a lot to go off of. So before we got too far in this one, we wanted to flush it out with council.
Love the connection or our ability to help SaberCon. What does it do for SaberCon?
So right now, SaberCon is not able to build for Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity because they have such a backlog, and they need to get basically a cash flow to be able to say, hey, you can start building again, get the cash flow to close out some of these other projects. They talked about, as a part of their partnership, dedicating the funds to Central Minnesota Habitat for Humanity to help SaberCon put in a larger garage door, which would allow them to do indoor builds during the winter seasons. so they were talking about some creative, unique measures. They would have to come back with a proposal. We didn't even want to go down that road if council was not thinking that this was, you know, a way we wanted to use the funds. And there isn't a good model out there right now. Nobody's done anything with these funds yet, so.
Do we get requests from others in the community?
I don't know that anybody even knows that this is out there. We already received the 2023.
Yeah, the 2023 amount was paid out with LGA in a full amount, because it was passed later in the year last year. Next year, we'll get, 2 payments of about $42,000 each, the first in July, the second in December. So by the end of next December, we'll have the full amount. I'm sorry, 84,000 is the full amount over 2 years. So we received 42,000 to date.
Sure.
And then 21,000 in July and an additional 21,000.
In the past, there's been some, I don't know, if direct engagement or reach out of some more blight properties in our community. Obviously, some become blight because financial cost to do that, and that's, I recall in the past that's been that. I mean, I think the more we can help SaberCon and help that develop, it's obviously solving a need in our community, but also helping develop talents within our youth.
I think they can use it to buy lots too.
Sure.
Which I know has always been a challenge. Like there's lots in Sartell, it's just, can they afford the lots that, you know, and have the cash flow to make that work, so.
Rob, so this is a one-time fund, 84,000? And do we think here's where my mind's going is, hey, I'd love to be able to say SaberCon engagement, but I have some reservation internally because what if a resident of Sartell could qualify for this for $15,000 to make a rehab for their house to be from, you know, a need perspective to meet code or to meet ADA that they might need. My concern is closing the door on that then too, right? I know we have to make a decision. I'm just wondering, is there reoccurring funds that we could say, hey, for 2 years we would support SaberCon and then evaluate? Or?
Yeah, no. Our best opportunity for us to have more payments in the future is to spend it.
That's government right there.
Yeah.
We were on a webinar and that's literally what they said. They're like, we're gonna go back and ask for this fund again and again and again, but we need you guys to use it.
Because we have to report on it annually, and I think we have a few years to spend the funds, but the faster we're able to spend it, and the other cities are able to spend it and show that it's pushed their initiative of affordable housing.
I get it.
It helps our opportunity in future years.
Mm-hmm.
Did I give you guys enough time to eat so you can now talk? Any thoughts?
I agree. Go ahead. I think it makes sense to do if we're in a position to do it and there's dollars to be invested locally in one way or another.
And then, I just want to understand, it's 42 or 84, so it says again, for 84, same amount intended, so is it?
No, I think I misspoke earlier.
I think it's each year.
It's each year. So we received the 84,000 in December, and then we'll receive an additional 40,000 in July, and the last 40,000 last in December. So a total of 168,000.
Yep, I did it is the same each year, so.
Yeah, sorry about that. So it's,
Absolutely. Could be a thought being consistent with policy that this council had developed earlier is,
Have them run through the,
can we put it there? I mean, if SaberCon comes with a proposal
yep,
to utilize all 84,000, that's awesome. In the absence of any others, we can make an easy decision. If we have engagement from the community and there's 20 that could go to residents that are in need and then 64 that year to go to SaberCon, like, it doesn't close doors for us, I guess is what I would hope to do.
Yeah, I think we can run them through that.
Does that make sense? We developed a policy that says, hey, you gotta submit a request. Okay. Yep.
There's an actual more formal application. It's what the childcare grant program went through.
Yep.
So they'd have to go through, kind of fill out the application, submit a proposal to you guys, and you review it.
Yep.
But I think that makes sense. Okay, I like that. Did you get enough time to eat, April?
I did.
You're up.
This evening, we wanted to talk through a couple capital improvements for a few of the city's infrastructure. So the first one we want to touch base on is water. If you recall, when we were going through budget discussions, the question came up about the water tower that's proposed in 2026. And if that's truly needed with the current population projections, or if it's can get pushed a couple of years based on those population projections. So to give you a little background on the water comprehensive planning, in 2018, there was a comprehensive plan update. That plan, based on the population at that time and population projections, recommended adding 1 million gallon storage water tower in 2020, and then a second one, 1 million gallon in 2025. So essentially 2 million gallons worth of storage by 2025. I want to emphasize, we're talking storage today. As the system grows, we're not talking about the additional wells that's going to be needed, improvements to the water treatment plant. So there are some other costs associated with these improvements, but we wanted to focus on the water tower because that is the next big planned expense and improvement to the system. Then in 2019, we decommissioned the water treatment plant on the east side of the city, and we started looking at locations for a water tower site, knowing that we needed one in 2020 and 2025. At that time, we updated the population based on what was that at that time and the projection moving forward. And because the growth of Sartell started to slow down, we pushed the water tower out a year. And then in 2022, because growth continued to slow down, we reevaluated the population projections and the timeline and updated the need to include the 1 million gallon storage in 2026, which is what we're looking at today. To give you an idea of, Rob, you want to switch to the next slide, please? To give you an idea of the population we are looking at for these three different studies, the 2018, the 2020 population that was projected was almost 23,000 people. The actual census was 19. So the population slowed down rapidly. And then in 2019, we updated the 2020 projection based on what we were actually seeing, looking at a 2.6 to 2.4 growth rate at the time. And then in 2022, again, updated that population growth. Go to the next slide, it's probably gonna speak volumes. So when you're looking at population growth, again, we did the study in 18 to start with. The growth rate from 2000 to 2010 in Sartell was 6.6%, pretty substantial. Slowed down between 2010 and 2020 to 2.3, and then from 2020 to 2023 dropped down to 0.6%. So as you can see, the studies we were doing in 18 and 19 we're using around that 2.3, 2.6 percentage, which has dropped off a lot. Public safety recently looked at a number of different numbers to project growth rates, and they're using a 1.5 growth rate as they project into the future for needs. So moving forward, we adjusted the timing based on a 1.5% growth rate. The chart just shows the dashed line is what it was, and then the different projections of those growth rates. Rob, you want to switch slides? I'm going to slide through this one. The storage that's calculated as the need is based off of demand, and there's two different demands we look at: maximum day demand, average day demand. So based on that 1.5 population projection, you've got the two arching lines there, which is those two different demands. The dashed lines running up and down are the 2020 census, than 2025, 2030, and 2035. If you go to the next slide, Rob. Thank you. So from those demands, you can calculate out the storage need. There are 3 different methods I want to talk about quickly for how we calculate storage need. The first method is the 10 state standards. That's based on usage. So basically population, what your population would use, method 1. Method 2 is your population with some added cushion in there for fire protection and fire safety. And then method 3 is a method that Sartell has historically used. It's what was used in the 2018 comp plan, updated because it's what had been previously used, but we don't know where they came up with that method or why it's being used. And we don't recommend using it moving forward, mainly because it produces a storage need that's a lot less than the industry accepted methods of 1 and 2. I think it's reflective of some of the issues we've had in recent years with being able to supply water in certain situations. And it doesn't allow for potential growth. So if you had a large user or a lot of growth happen, you could run into issues with not being able to supply them with water with that current method. And then if you had a large a large fire, you'd also run into significant issues potentially with providing water because of that large drawdown. Rob, can you switch to the next slide, please? So the existing storage in the city right now, you've got 3 water towers. The total capacity is 1.3 million gallons, but only 1.1 of that is usable, and that's just because the elevation difference of the towers. The water tower water level has to stay the same, and so there's a volume on top of some of the towers that are unusable because you create pressure differences and you have issues throughout the system. So the towers provide 1.1 million gallons. You also have 2 ground storage reservoirs at both of your water treatment plants. On the south plant is 1 million gallons, and on the north plant is 500,000 gallons. So if you count that ground storage, you do have 2.6 million gallons of storage. However, we don't rely on that ground storage for 2 different reasons. At the south plant, there's not enough infrastructure and water main in the ground to push it from the southwest to the rest of the city. And then at the north plant, we don't have redundant power there currently. So reliable volume that the city has right now is 1.1 million gallons. You wanna go to the next slide, Rob, please? So looking strictly at what we're considering reliable storage at the moment, and looking at 2025, we're grossly short on water storage. We have 1.1, and we need, even with method 3, which we wouldn't recommend, you're still short almost 1 million gallons. So, right, the biggest question is, can we utilize some of that ground storage so it is more reliable? Yes, you can add redundant power at the north plant to gain 500,000 there. You could install the water mains and the infrastructure, the piping needed, but that also has a significant cost to it and also takes time. If you go to the next slide, Rob. Just to kind of show you where that infrastructure is missing. So the red circle in that smaller map, that's right along County Road. The water treatment plant is off to the left, and you really have 1 pipe coming out of that south plant that runs along 19th and connects into Pinecone in 1 location. So there's just a huge infrastructure gap on that west side of the community. The bigger map just kind of shows some dash lines of where we would want to see water main installed in order to rely on that ground storage. I've got the black arrows on there just because through the years of how things develop, you do have some random bottlenecks in there where you have sufficient pipe for most of it, but you've got 5 block section that's smaller. So there's just, on top of the main lines that are shown there, you've got some other pockets that would need to get upsized as well. Go again, Rob. So this chart here, population on the bottom corresponds with the storage need. You've got the orange line and the green line which is method 1 and method 2 for calculating how much storage you need. The bottom dashed red line is the current reliable storage. The blue dash line is the current storage you have incorporating the ground storage. As you can see, even with the 2020 census, we're relying on that ground storage that we would consider not reliable currently. And so we would highly recommend not pushing back the water tower construction. You want to go to the next slide, Rob? I put this kind of in a graph form. So what I've got kind of highlighted in that red box is currently, if you add backup power to the north plant to utilize that 500,000 gallon of storage and construct the new main, you get 2.6 million. Or if you add the backup power and add a 1 million gallon storage tank, you end up with the same 2.6 million gallons worth of storage. The system status in 2025, if you're looking at method 1, you're just meeting your need. If you're looking at method 2, you're just not meeting it. I would call those kind of, you're meeting it. And then method 3 is up there, but like I said, I wouldn't recommend relying on method 3. So by 2025, those are kind of your options of storage tanks. You could get away with the 1 million gallon elevated storage, or you could put up a 1.5 million gallon storage. Do you want to go to the next slide? Not too far out is you're gonna need more storage, just with the need that's out there. So even if you put up a tower or make improvements to meet our need in 2025, you're gonna need an additional tower or an additional storage by 2035. So just recognizing that even though we're gonna plan to put a tower up or whatever the recommendation might be, we need to start planning or at least budgeting 10 years out for some additional storage. So looking out to 2035, assuming we put the backup power in for the north plant and we put up a 1 million gallon or 1.5 million gallon storage tank, we either need to make sure we're putting that infrastructure in place or we'll need another 1 million gallon storage tank in 2035. I think there's one more slide on the water, Rob, if I'm not mistaken. So looking at costs, in today's cost, a 1 million gallon tank is 7.5 million, which is roughly what we've got budgeted. A little higher just for some main connections. A 1.5 million gallon tank, 10 million roughly, and a 2 million gallon tank is 12 million. In 2019, we did look at locating a couple sites. Huntington Ridge, just from a hydraulic standpoint, was the best site, but you'd be putting a water tower right next to an existing water tower. 27th Street North is another location we looked at the north side of town, and then Pinecone Central Park ultimately was what was recommended with that 2019 site location study. Since then, do want to note that you did purchase a public safety facility and that property, which would also be a good location hydraulically. When we're looking at locations, we have to look at from an elevation standpoint what makes sense, and then also how easy or difficult it is to connect into the main trunk system. One more, Rob, please. So that's kind of a summary of it, the locations, the different costs associated. Recommend a 1 million gallon tank in 2025, 2026, like we are budgeting for, plus the redundant power at the north plant, and then another 1.5 million gallon tank in 2035. You could flip those two tanks and do the 1.5 million now and the million later. It's just costs keep going up, but then you also have to balance it with your budget. So wanted to kind of lay that framework out for you, and be happy to answer questions that you guys have with all the information we threw at you.
Joe?
What is the groundwater storage currently used for if it's not pumped out?
So it is pumped out. You treat the water and it's stored within the reservoir and then you pump it into the system. So it is usable, it's just not reliable. If power were to go out or if you had a fire, it's because we can't, there's limited capacity on how much you can push it through the system. If you're talking about the south plant with, has 1 million gallons. So it's limited to how fast and how quickly you can pump it from one end of the city to the other. So it's being used as storage because you treat the water, you store it in the 1 million gallon. It's just the limit you have to push it
Sure.
with the pumps
And
and the
lack of
piping.
gravity probably. Is, what would the cost, or do you know the cost for the redundant power there approximately?
We talked about that.
So realistically, out the north plant, we have a generator in our shop right now that is gonna be kinda obsolete because we did receive them generators for the lift stations from our FEMA grant. So we do have a generator of ample size, we just need to get the hookups put at the plant, so it should be pretty reasonable. Just don't quite understand what exactly that generator could run, you know, it's not gonna run the whole plant, which our other, it doesn't run the whole plant. You might run 1 well or 2 wells, you know, and a couple of pumps, so we haven't dialed that in yet. But we do have the opportunity to save some money on that by just putting receptacles and using an existing generator that we do have. But it would be enough to generate power for the pump, not run the plant, right? Right, I mean, it would bring in, I'm just assuming it could run 1 well and 1 high service pump, and the plant would run, you know, at a smaller capacity, of course, but the plant could run. That was one of my questions as, you know, on our consent, we were, redoing a couple things on the FEMA grant, and like, all of our lift stations, we've got redundant power on through FEMA grants, or a lot of them through FEMA grants. Had we not looked at this one, or did it not qualify at the time, or? I think we were really, really lucky to get that grant for the lift stations. I really feel that was a shot in the dark and we got it, which is great. Just to understand how the system works. So all of our water up in the air is all of our pressure. We don't need any pumps to turn your faucet on at any time. So all that water's up. So that's where we're getting our pressure, along with storage, of course. So that water is not pumped. Water being pumped, you know, you got mechanical issues, you know, you got power, you want to get that water up in the air stored, because it just saves any, you know, electricity pumping, you know, any maintenance on that end, other than, you gotta keep track of keep your towers in good shape, which is not cheap these days. Tower paint job, about every 25 years they're hoping. You know, I think our last one was almost 800,000. And it wasn't 25 years. Yeah. The east side was, God, a lot sooner than that. Yeah, so you really, you know, in my opinion, you want to get it up in the air. My opinion, I think our best spot is the public safety facility now that we do own that property. We want to try to utilize the water out of that south plant as much as we can. It's really good water. It's cheaper. There's not as much chemical use as the north end, so it's a lot cheaper water to produce for us. We do have a large, you know, water main system close on 19th. We don't have to put a huge infrastructure in to get, you know, all we got to get is a big water main really from 19th over to Pine Public Safety Building. And then we got a fairly direct feed from the north plant to utilize that plant more than we're using it today. Using it today, you know, with that north tower, we are, you know, that north plant is feeding that north tower, and a lot of our water use is up on that north end. So we're using a lot more water out of that north plant than we would like to be cost effective. Now I got you really confused. No, I mean, I look at the dotted red line, which is the need for infrastructure for the Southwest plant, or to tie the systems in. And Vito, we've talked about that for years. I mean, we now have a development in that area happening outside of normal development because of the absence of that, right? And so, I mean, that's gonna be a major area of growth for us, and I also think it's an opportunity to put that in as part of a project, any project that we're going to do, because that area is only going to continue to expand, and I don't think we want another one coming in that would go off of, you know, private well and or septic. And I don't know the overall cost of that infrastructure. And I think I noted, you mentioned we wouldn't do it because of cost. Do we know what that is? The dotted red line,
Well, there'll only be a short piece there at that point. It won't be all that.
Well, if the water tower goes in, you're saying if the water tower doesn't go in?
well, I guess the conflict I have is we're saying, hey, we either do a water tower, or we're comparing the cost of a water tower to the cost of this infrastructure as alternating options, is how I heard that. And I think the opportunity that additional force mains, if that's the right term, provides us is development opportunity for that corridor that otherwise might not happen until, once again, we bite that bullet or a developer bites the bullet to put those in.
We haven't taken that step yet to put a cost to the infrastructures that would be needed to make that storage in the south plant reliable.
This would only be one piece of utility.
Correct.
Right, yep.
And we would have to look closer at the other bottlenecks within the system. I've got some not as bold red dash lines on the north end of town, so you also need some east-west connections. And it's absolutely something we can look at, and that might be the first step in moving forward with water storage. Knowing we need it by 2026, it might be a preliminary design feasibility on looking what that infrastructure need would be and coming back with those two different costs. You know, we could definitely move forward with that. Just what I wanted to bring back to you, because the question was, do we need the storage by 2025, 2026? And the answer is absolutely yes. There is going to be a large expense that we've been planning for, and we need to continue to plan for.
That leads to my next question. Rob, you had showed us a couple meetings back a bunch of lines that scared me that I didn't quite follow, but no pun intended. You had an up and down. Was one of those lines in expenditures, including this tower?
Yep. Yeah, in 2026, we had planned for the construction of the water tower at 6.4 million. So most recent estimates at the 1 million gallon tank now is 7 million, so more than what I had originally anticipated, which would then mean a more than anticipated rate increase to our ratepayers or coming down on a different water project. So we already have 600,000 more that we have to deal with. So doing a 1.5 million gallon tank or 2 million gallon tank at 9.8 million or 12 million in 2026 would mean a substantial amount more of debt or a lot more from our ratepayers, or probably both. So since we do have a shorter timeline here and we need the capacity, that's part of the recommendation to just do the 1 million gallon tank in 2026.
But it sounds like we could compare the 1 million tank with the infrastructure to maximize the south plant,
Yeah.
whichever one's cheaper.
We can compare it. A lot of your infrastructure is underneath roadways, so now you're also paying to reconstruct roads. And if you're paying to reconstruct roads, if the sanitary sewer is older, you're also paying for the sanitary sewer. It just, that infrastructure cost, yes, the bolded red, you, maybe a little easier, you could do it trenchless on the side of the road, but once you start trying to fix some of those bottlenecks throughout the system to go further north, south, and east, west, those costs kind of snowball. Can we look at it and identify it? Absolutely. We can do that and see where it pans out. My gut tells me you're still gonna be better off going with the 1 million gallon water tower.
Yeah, and I don't doubt I think the easy answer that I'm seeing in front of us is we build a $1 million or 1 million gallon tank, right? But we still then hold a $500,000 gallon tank that we're gonna still consider it being offline or not usable, right? And so for me, it's how do we take all of the storage we have today and get it into the bucket that we would say is usable water which sounds like we need to make sure we've got a generator, and it probably means some infrastructure. While then we continue to expand additional tank storage sooner or later, I don't know. But we're not going to solve the problem that I hear that we will continue to have.
Ideally, if, my recommendation would be prepared with the backup, do the backup generator at the north plant, so that's more reliable. Plan for and still construct the 1 million gallon tank that we've been planning for in 2026. And then let's look at the specific infrastructure needs and where those bottlenecks are and lay out a 10-year plan to start tackling those so that by 2035, you don't need another tower necessarily. You have the infrastructure in place to utilize the ground storage you have at the south plant.
John, quick question. Out on the south plant, there are some dry ponds that are out back. Are those considered storage, additional storage, or is that just treatment water?
That's the water we use to backwash the filters. So in two different systems, most cities don't have that opportunity. They need to pump down the sanitary sewer we have through the treatment plants, and they pay for it. We're fortunate, it's all sand out there. We dump about 1.5 million, 2 million gallons of water in our backwashes out there, and it goes right back into the aquifers and the system. So, so we're very fortunate we have that. We have it up in the north in both sexes.
John, have we ever run out of water from demand, not from operational challenges?
I mean, I can tell you, probably 25 years ago, we had the north tower down to the column, the whole bowl was gone. But the system wasn't monitored as well as it is today. No, I can't say we've ever run out of water. We got our plant running 23 hours a day, you know, in the summer, and that's really why we get to these watering bans. We gotta shut her down and rest it. It can't run 24 hours a day for, you know, extended periods of time.
No, your operation and maintenance costs go way up. And so even with the ground storage, your operation and maintenance costs are typically more than if it's elevated as well. But if you're pushing your plant that much, you're gonna.
You know, we're running 23 hours a day on our plants and our pumps and our, you know, it's gonna catch up at some point. You know, we've been fortunate and we've tried to keep the maintenance going, and, you know, I mean, we're gonna have the next conversation, it's gonna go right into this, it's not any better.
Any other thoughts on water storage?
I think your recommendation is a good one. I mean, I don't know that we have another solution long-term.
And it's what we've been planning for and budgeting for to date, so stay on track.
Is there a cost difference? April, you're well aware that I dislike water towers.
Yeah.
Due to the visual and, more importantly, the cost to repair them, or not to repair, but to maintain them. Is there a big cost difference in a vertical one versus a tank?
Construction-wise, or
I don't know.
Vertical one or underground, you mean?
Yeah.
Then you have to pump, don't you? I mean, you're not using gravity.
Right.
right.
But you don't have to repaint it every 10 years at $1 million.
No, you have but you've got pump replacements, pump maintenance. I guess, have the life cycle costs of those on hand. Mayor Fitzum.
Can we pull that? I'd be curious. Is it easy to pull?
I would recommend doing that as part of a
Okay.
preliminary design study. There's just too many variables. It's not like,
Don't give me that look.
not something you can do quickly.
I just think water towers are ridiculously expensive and hideous. So if there's an opportunity to bury it and it might be cost effective, it's at least worth comparing.
There's
Hey,
a little.
it's not gonna be built before
there's
May
a-
anyways.
Yeah, what are you looking at?
We can, and there's a trade-off. You have to have some elevated storage if you want any fire protection.
Yeah, and we have
Right, there's a balance. You're never gonna want all ground. Yeah.
Yeah.
A tank there, it's not buried.
Yep.
But it's a tank, but they have the opportunity of the hill.
Right.
let's just keep that on the table of,
Size-wise, the Mac tank is 1.5 million gallons.
Jeez.
holy.
We're looking at 1 million.
Mhm.
The tank out on the highway 94, that's 1.5 million. St. Cloud, by McStop out there, that's 1.5 million too.
And so we're saying 1 million.
I mean, that's the downside. If we do a in-ground tank, we don't get to light it up and win an award.
Yeah.
But
You put your name on it.
yeah.
You don't get to use
But then
logo.
when future councils change the logo,
Sell advertising on it. Big pusher that
But that's,
for 10
we,
years, nobody likes
1
my
million.
Well,
ideas.
what's that?
I'm just thinking location, like, we're not gonna put we're saying 1 million, right? 'Cause
1 million.
We can't put that big of one behind public safety.
Why?
You could.
Well, I know, but
Where else can you put it?
Would,
Highway 15 somewhere.
We got a 400 over there.
We can use it as a training town.
Southwest Water Treatment Plant, just stick 1.5 million up there.
would the council be open to us bringing back call it a feasibility or preliminary design agreement to do a number of different things? One, site a location. Two, look at your tower versus ground storage cost comparison. Three, identify more clearly where our bottlenecks are within the system so we can plan out to 2035 as discussed. Is that something you would want to, I mean, we've got in the budget, design in 2025 for the water tower, so we can wait till then and we could do it as part of that design process. It's just if we're gonna look at a tower versus ground and we might switch it to ground, that might change quite a bit on how we're looking at that if we came in 2024 with more of that feasibility glance at it. No, bad idea.
well, whatever we're gonna pay out of it, let's make sure it's a part of what we're designing already.
There you
Right, so
go.
the design would have included a siting, a location anyways. It's just whether or not you wanna know the answer sooner than later.
I
We
know.
can wait till 2025 and we would do that
I just
site
think,
location anyways.
Tower you're not building until 2027.
Well,
There's a reason people, I mean, I get, nobody wants the big tower, but there's a reason people use towers, right? Because nothing breaks gravity. So it's
I
the
think we
reality of,
stay the course, and when we get to 2025 and we're talking about construction, it's,
stay with how it's budgeted and move forward.
well, I mean, at that point, let's talk about design and location, and I hate to spend a bunch of money on a feasibility study to help us plan for a bunch of ideas when,
Well, we do have a comp plan, so we do know our bottlenecks.
Yeah,
to some
it,
point.
That time
Right.
we can ask Senator Fitzham if he wants to help.
Oh, that was like swearing.
and maybe I was just misunderstanding, Mayor Fitzum. You're comfortable with going with a water tower in 2026 as planned, or you want us to look at an option of doing a ground storage? Because then there's another step in between there, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, I guess my personal take on it is I think we're gonna see a pretty significant slowdown. I don't know, I mean, I don't wanna dive into all the details here, that's not my area, but I don't know that we're gonna consistently grow by 1.5%. I think that's pretty inflated based off where the market's at or maybe potentially going. And so based off of building boom, we said, hey, we absolutely need this by 2026 or we're gonna run out of water. That might not, I don't know that if I fully believe or buy into that yet. And so if I'm tasked with making a decision to spend, hey, you've got $7 million budgeted or whatever the number is, if you can bring 500,000 gallons online and make it usable by adding infrastructure versus putting something in the air, I would rather put that $7 million in infrastructure because I believe we get a better payback from future development, which will require that infrastructure anyways. Future development's not necessarily gonna require a water tower in a certain area. And so that's the angle I'm looking at it from.
Yeah.
can it be an either or?
What do you
Is
mean?
Like, can we delay the 1 million in storage up? No, let me finish. Can we delay that by doing the infrastructure underground, like lines to capture the south water plants 500,000 that's available that we're not actually, that's what you're getting at. Like either, like, or do,
North Water Plant, my first thing would be
Two different. North Water Plant has a 500,000 that we can easily become reliable with the generator.
okay,
The South Plant has 1,000,000. The infrastructure you need, I don't know if you're gonna be able to do all of those construction projects going north-south and east-west before you theoretically need it, and those costs, I'm worried are gonna snowball. And so we can look at that, but that's that step that's needed. If we're gonna look at doing the mains instead of a water tower, there's another step that has to happen.
yeah.
And there's no way that's all happening in 2 years.
Probably not. So that's
Mains
where
aren't
we would recommend
necessary
looking to do
with,
that.
with the tower, like the infrastructure piece.
a little bit, but depending on the
Yeah.
location, there'll be some.
Even if you put the 500,000 online from the north plant with redundant power, you're still short storage to a point where I would be concerned if you wanted a large user added someplace, or if you had a significant fire and you're drawing down a big amount of water in a very short time. I would not recommend pushing out the addition of the storage any further than what we have it right now.
And part of what I grapple with is 10 years ago, we flowed, God, I used to know the number, thousands of gallons per minute at the paper mill fire. And didn't run out of water. We shut down a few times, but we didn't run out of water. And so I'm trying to get my head around how real is the concern that if we don't authorize the building of a water tower to be constructed and be online in 2026, that Sartell's gonna run out of water.
Just, you know, the incident you're talking about, we were flowing directly out of a water treatment plant.
Yeah.
We weren't filtering, we bypassed the plant, we
Yeah.
were just pumping everything
Yeah.
we could,
I
basically.
get it.
And it never shut off. The only time we shut it off, we had to backwash it, and then you guys had to shut down for a couple hours so we could get it backwashed and get it back online.
Totally accurate, totally fair. My point is, that event happened and that large scale event, knock on wood, is not gonna happen, right? In the future. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around what's the reality that we find ourselves in 2026 of running out of water in the city of Sartell.
I don't know if you're gonna run out of water, but you're gonna run into more and more instances of water bans.
Water bans.
You know, for the
Bless you.
summer. I mean, you're gonna
Sure.
go earlier, cause we can't keep enough water in the tanks to be fired, you know. We're running 23 hours a day, we're gonna lose a pump sooner or later, we're gonna lose something. Now now it's, you know, you're really, your ban is gonna be crucial.
Sure.
Because you can't pump enough water into your tank.
Yeah.
Or what if there's a commercial development that wants to come in that's huge, and it's gonna be high water consumption, and we have to say, well, you gotta wait till we put in another water tower. I mean,
Agreed, yeah, I mean, we can, what's the likelihood of that coming, right? I don't know. I mean, we could have a development that wants to come in south of County Road 133, and we'd say, hey, today, we'd say you'd have to go on private well because we didn't spend the money on the infrastructure. Like, if I'm spending $1, I'd rather spend it on a place that I think can drive additional development versus a tank, but.
Ryan, I get there's a lot to factor in, and the growth rate and everything else. To put like the numbers in perspective a little bit, so 10 years ago, so let's say 2010, population in Sartell was just under 16,000. By 2020, we're at 20,000, so increase 5,000 people. So I get 10 years ago, had a massive fire, didn't have an issue, we were bypassing, doing some things, but adding that 5,000 people and adding that demand puts a strain on the system that wasn't there 10 years ago. Looking at the numbers, if you go out to 2035, which is what we're saying, hey, we would need another 1,000,000 gallon storage from today, we're projecting a population of 23,600. So an additional 3,500 people And we need another 1,000,000 gallons of storage. So it's hard to look back 10 years just because you also have to factor in the population growth and the demand that had on the system as well. And so, again, I wanted to bring it up because what initiated the question was looking at budget, where are our dollars best spent? Do we really need the water tower? And let's not call it a water tower even. Do we really need the water storage in 2026? Yes, we're saying we do need that water storage in 2026. We can look more at what that storage looks like, ground or in the air, but at the end of the day, I think we've got the money budgeted in 2026 for storage. And I'd like to continue to, on that time frame, and keep that money budgeted in that time frame for storage, would be our recommendation.
Yeah, hear it loud and clear. I mean, it's budgeted for. I'm gonna continue to challenge that we're to build a 1,000,000 gallon tank and have 1.5 million sitting on the sidelines, in my opinion, but, I think right now the plan is to 2025
Some storage.
evaluate that.
We'll evaluate if it's mains and if it can help other stuff, absolutely. We can do that.
Council, any other comments on that?
For me, I just think to maximize what we have today, look at the infrastructure. And if we're gonna need a tower, I guess the only other thing that really hasn't been brought up tonight is we keep saying 1 million and then another 1.5 million in 10 years. But the cost effectiveness of another 500,000 right now, I mean, if we get to the place where it is a tank, I don't know how you, especially with inflation or where you're gonna go in the next 10 years, that you don't add another 500,000 to that to try to suffice a little bit longer. Be the only other thought I'd throw out here if we get to that level.
Brought up that conversation, but Rob really started to panic on us.
I know.
Well, we can run both scenarios in the rate study when they conduct it this spring and see how that affects rates and our debt and make some decisions at that point.
I'll probably get scared at that time too, Rob. I'm just looking at the screen right now going, wow,
yeah.
just 2.8 million for another 500,000.
I think I heard, Jed say you want to take on $2.8 million in additional debt.
Put that in the minutes.
The only part of this discussion is that, for the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next fun topic.
Yeah, if you thought that
I'm
was
being
bad.
sarcastic when I say fun, because like Anna said, this one's not in any better shape. So looking at the sewer infrastructure again in the comprehensive planning. Last comprehensive plan was done in 2018. So existing conditions model 6.4 is what we're looking at, with a future complete build out. Someday the city will need 11.12 million gallons per day of pumping capacity. Chart here also shows actual pumping data from 2019 to 2023. Just like in water, there's different, we call them peaking factors in wastewater that we look at. 10 state standards peaking factor is 2.65. More common peaking factors are 3 and 4 in the industry for what we use on how we size systems and when we determine when added capacity is needed. Unlike the water tower, you for sure do not want to get behind on your sewer capacity. You want to stay ahead because if you don't have the infrastructure to handle all the waste you're producing, it can create some massive issues. So,
You can't ban sanitary.
correct.
There's a lot more puns that could be offered here.
So, since 2018, we've been focusing primarily on making sure your existing force main into St. Cloud is in good working condition. We did an assessment study on it, ran a tool through it, see if we could find any corrosion. We're doing a surge tank project in order to keep that force main in good working condition because it has had some breaks in the past. Now it's time to look at capacity and where we're going from there. On top of that, Stearns County did a feasibility study for County Road 1 between where lift station 1 is currently into St. Cloud, which is highlighted in yellow on the map. the dashed pink line is the current force main location. The plan has always been to install redundant force mains, 2 force mains on that same alignment in order to fully utilize lift station 1's capacity. So with county looking at that feasibility, generally once that study's done and they're wrapping that up right now, they'll put it into their capital improvement plan. It'll be constructed in 5 to 10 years out. So we need to look at what infrastructure do we need to plan for 5 to 10 years out. And then also paired with, we're now doing the project to make the existing force main in good condition. When we started looking, you can switch to the next slide, Rob. When we started looking at the current system and the infrastructure and brainstorming different ideas, we looked closely at lift station number 1. So lift station number 1 currently has 4 pumps. 2 pumps are being utilized on a regular basis, and then a 3rd pump is utilized during high flows. The 4th pump doesn't provide any extra capacity, and that's strictly due to the force main limitations. The 4th pump is for redundancy currently, in case one of those other pumps went down. Even adding the 3rd pump, you do gain some pumping capacity, but it's limited because of the force main that's there currently. The current capacity of the lift station and force main is 5.1 MGD, and I would say that's generous amount that we think we can pump through that current lift station, the current force main. Based on all the data we have and the actual pumping capacity, the system has a peaking factor of about 3.5. So when we're looking at sizing into the future, we'd use a peaking factor of 3.5 to make sure we're sizing it appropriately for how the Sartell's system actually functions. If you want to go to the next slide, Rob. So when we started looking and brainstorming different ideas, we did come up with an alternative force main route. Instead of putting 2 redundant force mains along the current alignment, an alternate route would be along County Road 120 through Sauk River Regional Park, which the city now owns, all the way to the river, under the river, and then it would align with the existing force main in Whitney Park and discharge into the same location as it does now. By doing that, we can reduce the force main length by 4,500 lineal feet. On top of just material cost savings on that alignment, it also reduces friction loss. Dynamic head makes the pumps more efficient, so you gain more capacity by going on the shorter route. I'll go to the next slide, Rob. So the recommended improvement would be kind of the next capacity step for this system would be to utilize the existing force main and lift station number 1 and construct a new force main along the new shorter route. We would then utilize all 4 existing pumps, connecting 2 pumps to each force main. In doing that, you can go from the current capacity of 5.1 million gallons per day to 6.48 million gallons per day. The graph on the bottom correlates to that 1.5 population projection for need. The black dots are the actual data from the current lift station, and then the gray line and the orange dotted line are the projected increase based on that 1.5 population projection. So that solid thin line is the 3.5 peaking factor that I talked about. The dashed black line running horizontal is your current capacity at the 5.1, which is generous. The blue dash line is the additional capacity you gain by adding the second force main. If you interpolate between year, you run out of capacity roughly around 2035, which means, if you want to go to the next slide, Rob. 2030, I was looking at the wrong line. You run out of capacity in 2030 with the existing force main. So you would need the new force main on the new alignment. And again, you don't want to get behind, so we'd want to plan for that to be online by 2029. The next step and actually go to the next slide, because I kind of lay it out in phases. So we would propose a 3-phase step in adding capacity to the sewer system. The first phase, which we would want to be online by 2029, so you design in 27, 28, construct in 29. That's the new force main. You get a capacity of 6.48 million gallons per day, estimated at $10.2 million in today's costs. Go to the next slide, Rob. Phase 2, which would be triggered either by capacity of the capacity need or the end of life of the existing force main. Based on population projections, that would not be needed till 2044, so quite a ways out before you would need to do any other improvements on the system. But when that time hits, we would recommend a new force main at the Sauk River Regional Park and run 2 force mains and 2 lift stations until lift station 1's useful life would end, and that would be 3rd phase of decommissioning that lift station and having 1 lift station at Pinecone or at Sauk River Regional Park, which would shorten the force main even more. It's kind of the big picture, but wanted to also just point out the sewer system need that's not that far out as well.
So the one item I'll point out on this one is, well, a couple items. First off, not an urgent decision that we have to make tonight by any means. Second off, currently not in our CIP. The water tower we did have in our CIP, this we do not. And so they met today and we've reviewed and talked about it. Like, I think moral of the story is that we need to get it in our CIP. Rob and I were hoping that after the water tower in 2026 that we can get a nice stretch of 4 or 5 years of not taking out debt.
Sounds awesome.
So if we can get this to 2030 and beyond, that would be ideal, but at least accounting for it in our CIP. Right now, it's not planned for at all. So that's really nothing more beyond that that needs to be decided, just that, hey, we're gonna get this in our CIP, know that it's, I mean, I think Vito would tell you it keeps him up.
Well, there was one council member that asked me once, what keeps me up at night, and I can tell you it's this.
And then we rented a ball from Europe.
Well, yeah.
Is
But
it?
that doesn't, we're still in the same boat as here as we are in the water. I mean, and wet and rainy season, we have pumps running 23 hours a day. We're just right at that level. Now, do we have other issues in our system? Certainly. Some pumps, I believe, are a big issue.
I was just gonna say, tell us, like, so wet, rainy season.
Sure, everybody's got I and I. I mean, we do what we can to fix it every year. The manholes that we know of, the stuff we fix. But there's still, from here that way, how many sump pumps are
Yeah, I was gonna like.
and I'm a firm believer that they're going right into our sanitary sewer system.
Because it was always a challenge for me. It's like, hey, the rain that lands and goes down the drain, that's not what we're talking about.
Well,
we're
no.
talking about something that goes down your house drain. And so I laugh when you say wet season. It's the only thing that would cause you to flush more or send more down your drain would be a sump pump, right?
Well, yeah, that and groundwater goes up, and so ionize also what seeps into manholes or pipes when the infrastructure is in the water table.
Pretty good job of trying to stay with the I&I. We got a lot of through swamps, manholes we've raised up over the years, and there's just a lot of areas where we put infrastructure that probably wasn't up to a standard that it should be today.
Well, and I think if you look at the actual pumping data from the past several years, you can tell which years were what years, and you can tell that you guys done some improvements to make sure the I&I is minimized. So that's extending how far out before you have capacity needs. And to your point, Mayor Fitzum earlier of, yes, we're projecting 1.5. The last 3 years has been 0.6. So if it stays at 0.6, then it does get pushed out a couple more years. But to Anna's point, we want it on your radar because it's coming.
Sorry, what's I and I?
Yeah, I was
Infiltration,
Infiltration?
inflow and infiltration.
Okay.
inflow.
We thought it was a chemical, so.
No, it's water seeping into the system or being, yeah.
Is it, I'm trying to follow along, is it 2030 or 2035? I see both. I see the intersection on the graphs of 2035, looks like we theoretically run out. 2029 is when we talked about bringing it online though.
Again, you wanna stay ahead. So if you look at 2030 and you're looking at, go back one more, Rob. That one's a little bit hard. So if you run it, and I misspoke, if you run up
To the blue line.
on 2030, you hit the thin dash line right where the current capacity's at, which is that 3.5 peaking factor. So at 2030 is when you're hitting your capacity of your existing system. I misspoke earlier on.
Okay,
If we continue at the same,
If you
Growth
continue
rate,
at a
flush
1.5 growth rate, correct.
We call it flush rate,
yes.
and it doesn't rain.
We got the don't rain part down.
And you
Yeah.
don't have any big users that wanna come online.
Right.
Okay, well, so when we are doing CIP this spring, we'll get it added for 2030 or later.
So you can put a PSA only flush if you have to.
Yeah, so during,
It's yellow.
Yeah.
during the
just let
shutdown of watering ban, it's also,
You know the old story.
yeah, we are.
Don't say it. Okay, all right.
All right. One,
Last engineering thing.
and I'm gonna let Hunter talk.
All right, I get the fun one here.
I'm not gonna let.
Got this? Oh, yeah.
All right, so I get a little bit more fun conversation, looking at Sartell's growing trail and sidewalk network. In particular, looking at all the new improvements coming up and kind of just narrowing down what our priorities are. So I'll explain some of the handouts I have there too as I go through. This first slide here shows just some of our recent trail gaps. The left picture is the most recent trail gap priority list within the city, which was in 2020. And actually, if you're going through this list, there's about half of them have either been completed and or we've secured funding and are planning for them in the next couple of years. Which really leads us into the next slide on the right. Yeah, this one here. Which
Sorry, Hunter, real quick.
Yep.
So I'm following along. The numbers that you have there,
Correct. Yep.
those you're saying either already done or we've got funding, it will be done. So we're not,
The numbers there, so there's 13 shown on the left there, and those were previous priorities in 2020. I believe there's been 4 of them that have been completed. You know, there's actually another slide that shows this in a bit too. There's been 4 of them that have been constructed with overlay projects and stuff throughout the years, and then 2 of them have been. So we've secured funding for them. One of them is Heritage. I forget what the other one is at Pinecone and 7th. So there's been a number of them. Roughly half of them have either been taken care of or are going to be in the next 2 years.
thank you.
So we've completed a number of those through the years, and then just looking for some direction funding-wise and what the priorities are moving forward. This really comes into play when we're looking at grant applications. So there's a couple things to note. Whenever we're doing the grant applications for funding, it really helps a lot to have some sort of documentation to point back to. In fact, most of the grant applications, it's required that we attach some sort of documentation showing the city's priorities and showing that whatever area we're looking to improve has been on one of these lists in the past. So that really directs, you know, the grant applications for coming years. And then looking at that second point on the slide here, funding cycles are typically 4 to 5 years. And so you're looking ahead at what are your priorities, you know, not just now, but 4 to 5 years from now, knowing that you have to apply for the funds that you're, you know, if we apply for something this year, it's gonna be funding year like 2028, 2029. And so that's why it's important to look at some of these priorities moving forward and kind of get a direction of where we'd like to go, where you'd like to see those funds being allocated in coming years. And then another point there is that the grants do have to be very specific. So like if we have a flasher system going at one particular location and that's been identified in, you know, in previous priority lists, and that's what's applied for, Usually they're very strict in holding you to that exact intersection, or if it's a sidewalk and trail, they're very strict in point A to point B, and there's rarely flexibility in these types of funds. So it is important, as you know, we're looking forward here to kind of note that it's not, you know, next year's projects that we're looking at with these priorities. It's a couple of years down the road and figuring out what the priorities are for the city. And so part of bringing this up tonight is just one, you know, as I mentioned in the first slide, that a number of them have been completed, but then also just making sure that, you know, we as a staff level know what the priorities are moving forward and can have appropriate documentation. The goal from this is that we'd get some input on priorities as a city, and then we'll come back with a memo similar to that 2020 map and lay out, you know, here's what the priorities are, and we'd bring that to council for approval, and then be able to use that in some of these grant applications moving forward. Rob, if you want to go to the next slide. So these next two slides, actually, you do have a copy of this as well. That's the existing trail and sidewalk network within Sartell. So just hopefully helps to, you know, see where the city's at. That does include it does include the projects that were completed this past year. So you can see Heritage Drive on there. You can see 19th Avenue, Scout and Daler, County Road 1. Hopefully helps get a little bit of a visual of, you know, where the city's at, and then you can kind of pair that with the other figure that had the pink lines on it. As those are, the pink lines are areas that we've looked at just as a staff level. Here's some potential future connections. And so we're looking for some input on, you know, are these future connections a priority? What areas of the city would we like to prioritize and apply for grants in these areas? You can actually go ahead 2 more slides, Rob. So there's kind of a second part to this as well, and it's same conversation, so I'll tie it in here and then kind of open it up for discussion, but that's just crosswalks within the city as well. So there's a number of crosswalks. The thicker packet you have in front of you, along with the dark green aerial, that's the crosswalk priority list that was done in 2017. You can see on this image up on the screen, that differs, actually it's the one you have in front of you too. All the numbers on there were identified in those previous crosswalk studies, and all the ones that are in that bluish purple have been completed or addressed. And so you can see the red there is kind of the outstanding crosswalk priorities, and this is just areas within the city where there are crosswalks that exist. I believe crosswalks exist for most of these, with the exception of the heritage ones there, which will be completed, number 14.
Just one thing of note, just because the locations are highlighted, it doesn't mean there isn't a crosswalk. The recommendation sometimes is to do an enhanced crossing, like a push-button flasher system. So it's not that there's a crosswalk missing, it's just to make the crosswalk more pedestrian-friendly and safer.
And that's a good point. Actually, the majority of these on this map do have crosswalks, and a lot of them, you'll see a lot of them are the roundabouts with the 2-lane roundabouts. And if you get into just some of the details of the recommendations from 2017, a lot of those 2-lane roundabouts are the priority areas. And so you'll see, that's why you see a lot of the roundabouts highlighted here. And so just bringing this back to the trail gaps and crosswalks, it's kind of a broader discussion of, like I said, ideally we'd like to just have a general direction as far as what are the priorities as a city, so that, you know, 4 or 5 years down the road, we're not sitting there with an or a secured funding and wondering, why do we have funding for this? It's not a priority. So just recognizing that, you know, some of the direction is going to impact not next year's construction, but like that 4, 5, 6 year time frame, and then, like I said, we'll come back with an actual memo and bring that for approval and any further discussion at that point too. But with the maps in front of you, I'd be open to any questions. Otherwise, just kind of a general feel of, you know, are there some of these areas that perhaps aren't a priority anymore? They were at one point, or you can see the numbers through there. You know, I'm sure you have calls and stuff from residents, and just being in the community all the time, you have a good feel for what areas are, you know, a hot topic what areas would you like to see as a higher priority, and kind of go from there. So whether it's existing crosswalks or trail gaps, we'd like kind of direction on both.
I think we have discussed in the past that the roundabout at
Second Street, number 9 on the map.
Number 9, that's probably the most frequently used crosswalk with the highest volume of traffic. And I've watched many times people kind of play Frogger out there without any hope of getting a real good visual.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we've taken a big stab at closing a lot of the gaps, and I know your maps here show where we still have physical trail gaps. But if you're saying the pot of money's one and the same, I'd love for us to focus kind of this next phase into a lot more crosswalk enhancement. I mean, we've got a hell of a trail system, and I forget the numbers offhand.
Like over 70 miles. That doesn't
I was gonna say
include what
it's
we've.
Like 35 of trail, I think,
Yeah,
and over
it's
30 of
impressive.
sidewalk.
And-
And, sorry, of note too, like, just with what you're saying on the trails and stuff, you know, some of these you can see on here as like 23rd Street, at least highlighted in that pink, 23rd Street or Leander. And so some of those are more, you know, road improvement based too, and it's more of a conversation of likely doing those when the road would be improved.
Yep. And I guess that's where my mind's going is, hey, if there's specific projects that you're just gonna do and just apply for funding, I love the idea of finishing off these red dots so that the 70 miles of trails that we have, or whatever that number is the safest trails we can offer. I mean, I look at the other side of it, and one reference point would be I think it's slide 31, it's Creekview Preserve, it's 15th Street South. There's a 3-block, you know, missing of a sidewalk. One more.
This one?
Nope, sorry, keep going. One more. Back.
The one looking at just, or,
Yep.
yeah.
So if you look at Creekview Preserve, which is middle left of that page there, there's like 3 blocks missing. I look at that and go, hey, the neighborhood's built out in that area. There's not a high demand, and so we could take a stance of saying, hey, it's a gap, let's fill the gap. Or I look at that and say that road's probably at least 15 years old, if not 20 years old. And so the challenge I would have back is to say, hey, can you find these gaps and pair that with when you anticipate that road to be reconstructed? And if that's 20 years, if that's a 20-year-old road and you say, hey, in 30 years is its life, that means 10 years from now, like we should have that on the plan for 2033. So that
Is that the, oh, sorry, go ahead.
that road is gonna be reconstructed to be the optimal time to finish the sidewalk there. Outside of that, it probably needs to be development driven, meaning if it all develops south of there and there's now a bunch more traffic in that area, you would take it ad hoc, but outside of that, we're just tearing up someone's side yard to add a sidewalk that's probably not gonna be utilized. Jill?
Is that the actual gap, or is that are you looking at that green?
No, the gap's to the right, between
Oh, I see what you're saying.
between
Got it.
orange. Again, not a heavily traveled road today. So I don't know, that's my thought is crosswalk enhancement, short term, long term, pair these gaps with when that road's gonna be redone. Other thoughts?
Put that on to prioritize the crosswalk enhancements, right? Because to your point, there's some that are more needed than others, so have that.
Are there any that pop out at you that aren't still shown on here as red dots? We're missing, I mean, if you take a quick look, any that come to mind that you hear from residents or see?
I would say Connecticut and Daler is going to continue to get worse. And there's some sight lines there with some trees, but
And I guess also with that, or as you're looking at these, are there, would you rearrange any of the numbering on here? Obviously, it's different now that there's a number of them crossed off, but just the order of them as far as other, okay, sorry.
anyone have any preference? I think we'd probably all say Pinecone and Second Street South would be number one.
I think we get a number of complaints on 19, number 19.
Yep.
And that one we have funding, or we're applying for.
Right.
And that one's, yeah, I mean, that's a big one of a big enhancement versus maybe a flasher system too. Roberts and Heritage is becoming bad. There's a lot of activity there on the west side of Roberts, 4th Avenue, that kind of cross on the west side of that roundabout. I'm also trying to think the different safe route to schools. I mean, we get grants for safe routes to school. I want to make sure those crosswalks are as good as possible.
And that's, we talked about that last time, is APO is gonna come back out here in the next year or so with safe routes for school grants.
7th Street,
That's,
7th Street Pinecone.
that's gonna be a whole nother.
We do have funding for the intersection there.
The worst one used to be 7th Street and 7th Ave. Fenice's Corner, but I don't know that really gets used anymore.
Yeah, I think it's changed now at the high school,
yeah.
you know, you don't have all that parking on the street anymore.
Yeah.
It's gotten better.
Cutting through.
I would say the one just down there, so it'd be 7th Street and 5th Ave.
Yeah, they got a crossing guard.
They do a crossing guard during the school day, but I think about summer and all that.
Yeah.
Didn't we include those as an alternate in the last Safe Routes to School project and then ended up cutting them?
I think I remember
We
that.
put in the station for them to like pedestrian to get off the road.
Right.
Right, but the flasher, we also had flashers we
Oh.
did as an alternate, but the flashers didn't go in, but yeah, we did put the ped ramps in. Those got improved.
Is that where the new sidewalk down by the hardware store is, that crosses 7th from the football field?
I was referencing the one on the top of the hill.
5th Street.
Yeah, okay.
The new one down at the corner of the football field has flashers, right?
No.
Does not?
But it's a crosswalk.
Oh, I would add both those back on.
That's the same.
Well, something to think about 7th Street, so we have that old flasher system there, and we've
Yeah.
tried to replace it, you know, so we have a flasher system running down Pinecone to the 20 mile an hour and running on 7th Street, and it is old. The controls on it, we gotta go to every box and put in the times, and it's failing.
That's ours, not schools.
That's ours, yes.
Oh.
And we've put it in the budget a couple different times, the projects, and it has not made it out of the, it's been a cut. I would recommend that either we get rid of that, police chief, or we upgrade that at some point if needed. Police chief?
All I care about is if we ride a one-wheel on this.
Have a dedicated lane.
I think anywhere there's 4 lanes of traffic too, it creates a lot of confusion. Like you have half cars stopping, half can't see or don't have line of sight. So when you're looking at Pinecone, those jump out to me.
The other obvious ones, like Pinecone Second, like we said, it's almost like the trail system
instead of leapfrogging all over, if we can do 10 and 12, then we have a whole path from 2 all the way up to 6. When we just put one or the other, we don't know which one takes priority. But
And I think anything around the schools, the more we can get that, I'll speak from personal experience, like, my kids wanna ride bike to school, and it's like, no, there's uncontrolled intersections, right? But it's like, the more we can infiltrate those school areas, the more kids in our community or parents in our community that feel safer to have their kids go there with better crossing systems.
Not to diverge from the light systems, but finishing off Riverside to the extent we could would be very nice, I think, for the community.
I was gonna say north, south, or
I see two big both.
that was my first thought when I was looking at the trail, was I would prioritize the north over the south. Just, I think south can develop more once we start going in by the time of landfill, you got that filled in. And that's 5-10 years away. For the north side, there's people that jump on that now.
Yeah, they just continue north.
Go down on that south one, there's not many houses there right now.
in both those sections are outside, or the north one is outside city limits, so that would be a joint discussion with the county. They have ultimate plans, I think, to take it all the way to Mississippi River Park someday, so it's on their radar, but just the timing of that, we coordinate with them and work closely with them on that.
Any other thoughts?
I think
Got what you need, Hunter?
Good.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Last item, but I promise you, we're not gonna go through 300 pages of city code. Just wanted to get this in your hands and to remind you all, since some of you weren't here at the last workshop, we did go through most of the main items in red. Yep, wake up, Tim.
That was Senator Elmas that wasn't at the last one. Hasn't been here for a month.
So Carrie went through and accepted all the formatting changes just to make it easier for you guys, so it doesn't look like there's a million comments in there. And then just left the trackable changes in red of any like major content changes. So go through, review. She's got a few more formatting things she wants to clean up. I'll continue to send it out in Friday updates, and then March 11th, is that what you're thinking for the public hearing? So we've got time. Just want to keep it on your radar. Keep checking it. If you have feedback, we'll keep bringing it to workshops. But just wanted to make sure you remember to take a look at it. They're actually, I'd say 90% of it was formatting. There was not as much content needing to be changed, mostly formatting and like outdated terminology. So.
Did we take out the misdemeanor for council and appointed?
Yes. Yes, and it matches what Stacy has put together for the governance code of ethics. So you'll notice that in there. Other than that, just want to keep it on your radar.
We've already done roundtables, so look for a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.